Hello, welcome back everyone with another conversation podcast with Peter Ingle and Mihai Algiu. And you'll see below an entire playlist with close to 30 episodes on this theme of reigniting the fragments of the fourth way, where we are expounding from our theoretical as well as practical experiential experience of working with these fourth way system ideas. And for the last few episodes, we focused on this concept of chief feature or feature, which are all flavors of the ego. And so today we are going to touch on three other features, and we covered so far vanity, arrogance, self-pity, self-deprecation, various types of manipulative power, destructive power. Yeah, we touched upon different. These are all flavors of separate self. These are all aromas of false personality, and yeah, I guess I was talking to Peter just before this. As a trap would be to say, well, what do I need to do about it so I can change this, so I can make it better, so I can fix the situation. Just a moment. And the idea here is to be wary about this kind of attitude, trying to fix the situation, trying to change it, trying to make it go away. Yeah, it's almost like the ego wanting to change the ego, to hide itself more, to get more recognition, to get more perfect, so the problem cannot be solved at the same level with the problem. And it's not about self-improvement, what we are talking about, and being more a competent ego or more sturdy ego. So here it's about bringing the lens of discriminatory investigation, seeing of this construct, mental, emotional, bodily sense of ego, separate, autonomous sense of myself that appears to be like that, but it is not. These flavors is like a show that is produced by our true self, by our consciousness, when it is in the setting of being asleep, or as they call it in the second state, in the fourth way, being not knowing oneself and living in identification and self-forgetfulness. Then when that happens, consciousness has no choice but to be in self-pity or arrogant or fearful or controlling or very particular. And this reminds me of a quote from, when I work with people and they ask me about this, and I sense that they want to improve it and eradicate it. There's this quote from a Sufi master saying that your darkness will always be your constant companion. You will never be parted from it. Your darkness, I would say, your feature, your ego feature will be there.
Yes, its tendencies and its impulses will still be there as long as we're alive. But what we're talking about is awareness transcending that, such that there is a gradual diminishing of a sense of identity associated with those impulses and these urges, these tendencies. They will still be there, but without a sense of identity attached to them. And chief feature really means chief tendency, chief impulse, the main impulse, which causes our awareness, our consciousness to lapse into this feeling of I. And each person is prone to a different flavor of this. And they're all the same in one respect. None of them are better, none of them are worse, although the features in us will evaluate themselves and the other features according to kind of again, a superiority, inferiority totem pole, which is characteristic of the ego in general. This is how it views, or this is how we view the world through the lens of the ego. When we become the ego, and in fact, that's what happens. Our consciousness takes on this form of identification, and this form is what is known as the ego. The ego is not some separate thing in us. It is, we become the ego. Our consciousness, our awareness becomes a sense of I. And that's what the ego is. It's this feeling of I. And what we're talking about with these features is the flavor that that takes on, and it's different for different people. And so it's very useful for each person who's interested in awakening to understand what this is in themselves, so as to know in full transparency, this is not awareness itself. This is not consciousness. This is what happens when I fall more asleep in this person, this body, this mind.
Yeah. Well, we're planning to take today 3 classic ones that can be across types. In the fourth way tradition, there's this knowledge that there are certain features, they come with a certain body type, and there are some features that can be found in many body types, like vanity, or it's self-deprecation. Many types can have that. It's a kind of universal pattern. And as well as this, we are going to talk about today Tramp, the feature of Tramp and the feature of Lunatic. And then we'll touch on the Naivete. And once again, these are specialized terms, so it's not a dictionary term, and it refers to a certain set of behaviors, ways of thinking, ways of feeling, ways of operating, ways of perceiving the world, oneself, all one's relationships. We can start with, let's start with Tramp, Peter.
Yes, this is a feature. Most of the features that we've described so far can be linked to what is called a body type. We haven't talked about body type too much, but Tramp is a feature that can apply sort of across the board to all of the types, to all people, but it becomes predominant in some people. And Tramp is, well, I think that before we go into the deeper psychological aspects of it, we could talk about how it manifests and how you can recognize it. And one way is Tramp, this feature is, it feels like kind of a fear of, in areas of commitment or taking responsibility, being accountable, being self-disciplined. All of these things, all those things I just mentioned are kind of anathema to Tramp. It's like, no, I don't, ugh. That makes me, oh no, It pulls back, it resists. And in a way, Tramp is it's a kind of a resistance feature. It's not so active. It's the person who says, I don't care. So what, man? You know, peace, brother. Let's just take it easy. Let it be. I can adopt all of these attitudes, which sound like sort of reflections of consciousness itself, awareness itself, accepting everything, everything being one. But this feature psychologically sees everything, it measures everything kind of equally. It can't discriminate. This is actually better. This would be better for me. This will be worse for me, or this is a better alternative. So it lacks what we often would say in our former school was Tramp lacks valuation. And the reason it lacks valuation, it lacks almost you could say a gene for being able to value according to a scale of discrimination. It just simply doesn't. It has a hard time seeing that something matters more than something else. And it's not a stupid thing. It's not a matter of stupidity. It's sort of a gauge. A person has this tendency with this gauge not to discriminate very much between things. And so, you know, you see, and the way you see it exhibited is, you can often see it in someone's dress and in their home. Tramp will not iron your shirt. It will just put on the old shirt. It will not wash, it won't do the laundry until it's absolutely necessary. It will leave things on the floor. It will leave things undone. It will leave dishes, let dishes pile up in the sink. It won't make the bed. It doesn't mean that you should rid yourself of these things, that you should be this perfect, sanctified, absolutely clean home, you know, all those. No, as George Carlin said, jokingly and accurately, your house will never be perfectly clean. He was admonishing those who strive for perfection. At least one of your children will disappoint you. Your house will never be clean. His 10 almost commandments. It's very funny, but it's true with Tramp. You don't have to strive for perfection, but Tramp is more noticeable in these areas. You'll just see the person is kind of unkept. Their environment is unkept. Their clothes are unkept. Their bank account is unkept. It's no one's being accountable, taking responsibility, making any kind of effort. Even the word effort, not a pleasant word for this feature. Whereas the word effort is very appealing to some other features. But to Tramp, it's like, ooh, effort, commitment. Tramp is often not on time. Tramp doesn't follow through with things. You know, it's the person who says they'll meet you and then they don't show up. And then you wonder what happened. And a day later they go, oh yeah, I'm sorry, man. I had lunch with Peter and I forgot all about our appointment. Sorry about that, dude. Let's, you know, and it doesn't even bother them. It's not how they operate psychologically. So those are some examples. Maybe that prompts in you some other examples, Mihai, of how it manifests, how we can see it visibly and or psychologically.
Yeah, actually it helped me what you said. Yeah. It seems like there's some kind of sense that there is nothing is taken seriously, nothing matters. There's not a sense of something is important. Hey man, this is important. It's like nothing is important. And yeah, I like how you put it. It's very easy to recognize them outwardly because that tends to be unkept, shabby, so to say, unkept, in disarray, messy. As if there's some kind of abdicating power, you know, somehow there's no captain. Somebody should be there to take care of this, to take care of that, to take care of the dishes, to take care of finances, as you said, the house, you know, the car. I remember now there, you know, somebody pulls over and then you look into their car, it's all of this junk thrown and stuff like that somehow, and it's seemingly it doesn't matter to them. That's what's interesting. It doesn't bother them. It's the opposite of this kind of intentional Zen feeling, which there is something about this in many spiritual traditions. There's this beauty, cultivating beauty and harmony, which is a good way to cultivate this intentionality, to be there and treat its moment as if it's really meaningful, because it is. Yeah, could be highly relaxed individual. I mean, it's usually associated with some more like in the 60s and 70s, but it's way beyond that. It's a kind of relaxed, and yeah, as you said, lack of the hard for them to commit, because somehow interest in freedom and being freedom in that way of don't have to do anything.
And there's a pride that the feature of Tramp has a sense of pride in this freedom. I'm freedom. I'm free. I'm wild. I'm carefree. This idea of being carefree.
Mm.
And this feature also is critical of people who are disciplined and who
Mhm.
have their home in order and their finances in order, relationship in order, things like this. It's each feature takes offense at the other features which display a strength that it does not have,
Mhm.
or that display a weakness that it does not have. And Tramp, interestingly, is kind of has this natural relativity, we would call it, right? It can see that, after all, it's true. Things aren't so important because from the perspective of awareness, conscious awareness, that's true. But what it means is they're not important in the sense that they don't, we don't have to identify with them. We don't need to be identified with anything, but that's from the dimension of consciousness. That's what that means. What happens now is Tramp is in the psychological world, in the mind, saying nothing is important. We don't have to do anything. And
Mhm.
so it manifests on the level of our centers in our mind, our body, our intellectual, emotional, instinctive, and moving centers, sort of imitating a, a point of view, a viewpoint that would naturally come from consciousness, and then adopts that as nothing matters. Why should I? What does it matter if I didn't show up? What does it matter if I'm late? What does it matter if I'm late paying my bills? So what? Because it doesn't matter. But on the level of the mind and body, it does matter in that it makes a difference and it affects your entire life. And people who have a feature of Tramp, of course, as like all the features, attract certain other types of people. Their friends, their closer friends, their people they're attracted to can easily also have Tramp. And you can kind of see sometimes a group of people, 4 or 5 or 6 people, and you see them together and they all have that same flavor of ice cream. They're all uh, have Tramp. And it's unfortunately, it's kind of just the word tramp. Do you know, it's like bum, but it's not meant to imply that. It's meant to, but it's such a good word. All the features, when you study them, they're all such good words describing these things. But again, this is not a bad feature. And but here's the other thing. Someone with Tramp doesn't really care so much about this idea of chief feature. It's not, so what? Got a Tramp feature? Okay, big deal. It doesn't care. It doesn't see the value of understanding the
Yeah.
significance of knowing about chief feature.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said because give me it can manifest in different centers. So in the can be in the instinctive center, moving instinctive center. So how basically ignoring one's health, knowing that there are certain problems at the level of the body, but like putting, postponing doing any medical tests or going to the dentist, some kind of, it's going to be fine, that doesn't matter, it's okay. Then could be at the level of the space where we are in, the car, the office, the bedroom, um, and it's messy, disharmonious. And actually, all of this, there's a certain frequency, there's certain hydrogen. There's lack of attention, there's lack of attention, lack of intention. Uh, then could be Trump at the emotional level, maybe uh, how we treat our friendships or how we project the same. It doesn't matter. Like as you said, the moment with being late and like without even realizing, but being disrespectful or ignoring or hurtful to some of our friends just because there's not enough, let's say, not taking emotional responsibility, not taking care, emotional care. Uh, Also at the intellectual level, I would say, not wanting to go in depth, is staying at the superficial level, not wanting to prepare, winging something. I guess reluctance and not enjoying this effort going deep, being precise.
Yes, in this regard, it can manifest as a kind of laziness in all the centers because this feature is prone to passive inertia. Some of the features we've talked about are prone to passive inertia. Some are prone to active inertia. Have to be moving all the time, have to be doing all the time, have to be controlling all the time, have to be seen all the time, this kind of thing. And others, it's don't want to do anything. No, don't. The idea of overcoming the passive inertia is kind of repulsive to this feature. And this is not just one thing. This is a physiological and psychological frequency, as I think you said it, Mihai, that controls us. It's in charge, because it's not that it's in charge so much, it's our makeup as the human being. We are born with these features. Now, the tramp, in many instances, is not, you're not born with it. You might be born with another feature that is prone to passive inertia. And then you develop this psychological, maybe you live in an environment. You learn that it's fine to be sloppy. It's fine not to clean the house. It's fine to not know where your next check is coming from. It's okay. And so you live with people and you grow up with that, and you grow up with the attitude of nonchalance. Nonchalance is a kind of a wonderful thing for Tramp. It's part of its freedom, yes, quote unquote freedom. I can be nonchalant, I can be carefree, etc. But it's in our blood, it's in our bones, these features. This is not one thing and we can sort of pull it out. No, this is interwoven into our whole psychology and physiology, into our whole body and our whole mind. And it's not bad, but the value of knowing it is understanding. You know, awareness, it's said that it cannot see itself. Awareness consciousness does not perceive itself. It can perceive everything else, but it can know that it is the perceiving. But this thing about features is all of what we're talking about, the psychological aspects and the physical manifestation in the world, all of this can be seen. All of this can be perceived by conscious awareness. And by virtue of seeing it, knowing about it, and then seeing it, the realization can deepen that there's something that's seeing it. And this knowingness of on the part of the perceiving is what we're interested in, really, in the end. It's not trying to change these behaviors necessarily right in the beginning. Although we'll talk about that a little bit too, because there is value in putting some obstacles in the way of these features for the purpose of turning inward more deeply and seeing how it is associated with our feeling of I inside. But then beyond that feeling of I is this consciousness as the perceiving that sees all.
But in order to go there, to have access and to play in that realm, we need, from my experience, we need to have a life of valuing consciousness, valuing truth, and being serious about this and putting a lot of effort on this. And in order to focus in a grounded way on awakening, one needs to have time, and one needs to have money, and one needs to organize one's life in such a way that one can still pay rent and go to work and still allocate time to go to meetings, to go to retreats. So that's where the Tramp comes in. The Tramp will sabotage this, will think that it's easy, that it's enough to just read some things and spout some things and hear some YouTube, and it's going to work out by itself. So yeah, this also, it's important to bring intentionality and to see, to be honest and precise about the truth about ourselves, the truth about our finances, the truth about our relationships, the relationship with the food, with the sex, with money, with other people. So because everything matters at some level, because our sleep that plays out here plays out everywhere. So basically every little thing is actually it's a embodiment of our attitude with God, with the self, with everything. So that's where Tramp becomes you don't even start to play in the real, more serious awakening game unless one is able to develop this valuing what's really important and making active effort in spite of my laziness or this attitude of taking it easy.
Yes, and we used to also say that Tramp is characterized by a lack of valuation for oneself.
Mm.
And that, I mean, you can take that on different levels. It's meaning partly a lack of valuation for this sacred opportunity, really, to experience this form as a human being through which consciousness can realize itself. At this, let's say, at this level of the universe, or this level of reality, somehow this human being has this capacity in this form. Most other forms that we know of don't have this capacity, seemingly, where in which, through which, by means of which consciousness awareness can realize itself. And so there's a lack of valuation for that part. That's one way to understand it. Another way to understand it is, as a human being, it manifests a lack of valuation for myself. As a person, let's say in the community or in my company or in my circle of friends, to value myself as someone of dignity and worthiness and self-worth. That intrinsically there's a psychological lack of that. But what happens is then it manifests as, I don't care, nothing matters, everything's the same, so what? And then that becomes kind of this false vanity, this persona of someone who seems to appear to be somebody who's nonchalant and uncaring, but actually it's masking underneath a deeper sense of a lack of that, a lack of self-worth. And so this can become an important area for someone with Tramp. This doesn't mean you look in the mirror in the morning and say, I love you, you're a wonderful person. Don't get down on yourself today. You know, this is just the ego talking to itself in the mirror. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about something much deeper internally, valuing oneself as both the temple and as the Christ consciousness in the temple.
Yes.
Valuing both. And increasingly, I've had the opportunity to watch some people, some friends of mine who have Tramp, and watch their valuation for themselves as a person and their devotion, their seriousness in the inner work, we could call it. And to watch that, both of those outgrow and begin to displace this tendency of Tramp, which, like all the features, is just imposed. It's a way that the feeling of I gets imposed on us, in us, and it's escaping from that sense of I.
Yeah.
Not becoming a better person for the sake of becoming a better person. That's true with all the features. It's for the sake of transcending this sense of I and not having it drag us around. Our features drag our consciousness around with them, which is very different than operating from a more conscious place and monitoring and watching these impulses in us, but not being drowned by them again and again and again.
Just prompted by what you said, yeah, I guess there is this self view that can actually get at some kind of clinical level, like I don't matter, I don't matter myself. So then how people treat me doesn't matter. So I'm more like prone to being walked all over or taking abuse or disrespect. Um, Also, this Tramp attitude, they are going to create stress sooner or later. They are seemingly relaxed, and all of this, the seeming utility of this Tramp attitude is to take it easy, to not be overwhelmed, not to become like those people that are working so hard. So the seeming payoff is to ensure ease, freedom, autonomy, lack of being caught into the system. I hear people think, I don't want to be caught into the machine in this society. So there's all of this, but then it accumulates a lot of, it creates stress because I don't have funds. My place of stability is not stable. I have to keep moving around, car problems, all of that. So then my whole psychic energy, it's now focused to fix years of kind of Tramp, basically. It is important actually to this beauty, to have your room in which we are. That's a good exercise to bring some beauty to it and to bring intention and attention to it, and to clean up your altar or to dust things, because it's a reflection of what's inside. Somehow it will give more higher hydrogen, will feed one. There's no, all the temples, like Buddhist, Shinto, Torah, they were beautiful and orderly. There was no tradition or religion I've seen in any temple that was a mess. So, all right, I feel we covered it quite a bit, and let's go to another feature, which is connected to Tramp. It's it's on the same spectrum, and what is called in the fourth way a lunatic feature, which doesn't mean that somebody's mad or crazy or has psychotic features or something like that. It doesn't come like that. It's connected to some kind of orientation of, how can I say it, being very, very particular, very particular, and needing to having a little bit now, everything matters a lot. Every little thing is very important and it has to be in a certain way. So there's it's the opposite of Trump in a way that now everything matters equally, everything is important. And then basically the absence of being relaxed and being very tightly wound around every little thing, so that there's some kind of stress behind it and some kind of identification around things being in a certain way, and can show up in intellectual pursuits, can show up in the way we manage our energy, our time, our house, our everything. If you have any thoughts on this, Peter.
Yes, what you said reminded me that this is why we're introducing these two features together, because in a way they are mirror images of each other. And so whereas Tramp is seemingly flexible, nonchalant, uncaring, Lunatic is rigid, inflexible, over careful. Tramp is either late or doesn't come at all after saying it would show up or something. Whereas Lunatic shows up not 5 minutes early, a half hour early. It's afraid of being it's afraid of being out of order, out of control, but in a self-controlled way. Lunatic isn't necessarily, a person with lunatic feature is not necessarily someone who wants to control others. It's almost always a very high degree of self-control, over self-control, to the point that a person can become also paranoid. But it's a rigidity, it's extreme, as the word implies, lunatic, lunacy. It doesn't mean a lunatic like in a lunatic asylum. That's how the word is commonly used. It means more someone who is extreme and again, as Mihai mentioned earlier, in all of the centers. So you can be very lunatic with someone lunatic in the instinctive center around food, for example. I'm going to be all vegan. I'm going to be all this or that. They go to extremes. There's no relativity, no balance, no common sense, and no flexibility, and certainly no spontaneity. It's very ordered and strict and extreme, and the borders are very narrow. And the same intellectually, someone who has a feature of lunatic, their thinking is very narrow, very extreme. They cannot get off of that channel they are on relative to politics or economics or religion or whatever it is. It's very hard to have a conversation with someone who has a chief feature of a lunatic, and especially if their chief features are manifesting strongly in that moment. You can't get them to even entertain another point of view or another possibility. It's done, it's settled, I'm right, I know this is how it is. And then the same thing if they're involved in a project with the moving center. They will work until 3 in the morning. They will not stop until it is secured, battened down, tied down, finished. They'll sacrifice sleep and food. It's extreme. It's going to these extremes. And you can feel it when we're talking about it. This happens, when we talk about each of these features, you can feel it kind of circulating in yourself. It's extreme. There's almost an extremeness in my tone of voice as I describe it. And that was happening with Tramp too earlier. You could kind of feel the nonchalance coming out as we speak about it, which is interesting. Emotionally, lunatic will get excited about something, and then that's it. Nothing else is now as important as this. And this is now my cause or my latest interest or my latest, and now I'm going to be a proponent of this, and I'm going to be telling, and it's just, now that's it. And so whereas Tramp has no discrimination or general lack of discrimination, lunatic, as I was saying, whatever it is now is suddenly more important than anything else. And so it thinks it's discriminating. Psychologically, a person with lunatic feels, I am discriminating because I know this is most important, but it's at the exclusion of other things in that moment or for that period of time. This is the person who's waxes their car for 2 hours every Saturday. They get in the car and there's never a speck of dust or lint, or they almost maybe keep a vacuum cleaner in the car, in the trunk. It's sort of like that. That's not the average person. Or someone whose kitchen is sanitized 3 or 4 times daily. This can become obsessive compulsive disorder. This feature has a tendency to run along those lines, and it's seeking the safety and the security and the comfort of things never being out of order. All my shoes are organized in their place in the closet. The closet is impeccable. My desk drawers, no clutter. Cars waxed and washed. Again, I'm using extreme examples, but this is the type of person who is prone to those kinds of things. Again, nothing wrong with it, but what happens is it becomes a feeling of identity. Now it's I. I cannot be late. I am not late. I'm here. I'm first. I showed up. I've been here for a half hour waiting for the meeting to start. Or my shoes are polished. Me, I. It's a form of identity.
Yeah, I see. As I hear you talk, I have people in my life. Let's say I'm or wanting to buy a car. Like a lunatic will now really choose some model and then study in depth and go in very depth and see what is the best year and what was the best this and the year when there was recalls and these models. So it goes in a rabbit hole, deep rabbit hole of studying, and then it's almost hard to get the car. And I had friends like that. They will go into a hobby together. I introduce them to something like, hey, let's do archery, or let's do motorcycling, or let's do, and the person will get enthusiastic like myself. But then after a few months, I could see they became a specialist in that, and they knew all the models and all the history of all of that from scratch. I mean, initially I was impressed. Then I realized that, man, it's like how many hours you are doing this in the night, and there's some kind of obsessive quality and feverish quality and somehow compulsive quality. You can't relax until all those T's are done and everything is very precise. It's a seeking of control, safety, security, and perfection. I guess from the point of view of intellectual and spiritual, now everything is important. Every idea in the system is important. Every practice is important. So it is important to see which one is more important in order for the work to be practical, and what is more important to focus on, to have this discrimination, the right discrimination.
Or we used to call it scale.
Mm-hmm.
Scale, the idea of scale and relativity. Scale meaning that everything exists as a part within a larger whole, but has its place in this scale. And then relativity, it means how is everything tied together? How do all the parts relate to one another? And what happens with Tramp is it's an excess of relativity,
Mm-hmm.
and a lack of scale psychologically. And Lunatic's the opposite, it's the reverse. There's excess scale and lack of relativity.
Hmm.
And I know that when I experience the feature of Lunatic, it often has sort of an adrenaline feeling about it. Yes, I must drill down into this. I must study this, as Mihai just said, studying about cars or motorcycles or whatever, and master this topic within so many days or whatever. But there can be kind of an adrenaline-like rush to it, an intensity, and again, an extremity of energy. Whereas Tramp is the opposite. It's kind of this low idle all the time. Why get excited? Why gear up? Why shift into gear here? Let's just stay in neutral because it feels so good. It's so nice. Whereas Lunatic is, no, it's in gear now relative to whatever the task or the situation or the fear is. You know, when you think about some negative emotions like paranoia is it's a lunatic form of emotion. And there are many other examples too. But people with lunatic can be prone more to paranoia than others, as one example.
Yeah, and in the instinctive center, this it's highly recommended to know, especially in our day and age, what we are eating, because a lot of the food in America, at least, it's like full of poisons and toxins, and it's not actual food. So yeah, I like to know what I'm eating and to eat organic food and this or that, and less processed, a part of wisdom and taking care of the body. But the lunatic in the instinctive center here will just all the time check all the ingredients and know everything about every little thing, and be updated with, they discovered that there is new chemical, that they are in some type of green sofas, that they discovered that it creates this thing in babies, and so becomes all about it. Conspiracy theory can go there, and seeing all of these signs and combined with fear can become a powerful powerful contracting influence.
And also, this lunatic in all of us can manifest in the form where we start to experience a certain emotion, let's say a sense of doubt, or we have we feel something up here, near my heart,
Yeah.
or a nerve, And there's the sense it's always going to be like this, and it's only going to get worse. And it could be really bad. It could be really, the end is coming. The world is going to fall apart next week. And if you go on the internet, you see there are people they are selling lunatic thinking and lunatic options. And they get a lot of eyeballs because people are the feature of lunatic too is prone. Oh, ooh, what? Oh gosh, yeah, it's coming, it's happening, etc. So there's this form of extreme thinking, extreme imagination, and particularly to watch for extreme negative imagination. Extreme negative imagination almost always has a lunatic component about it. So we can see these features different, even if these aren't our chief features, whatever it is, we can see these features manifest in us in these ways, just examining the form our imagination takes and the kinds of negative emotions we're prone to are often connected directly. In fact, I would say always directly connected to features.
Yeah, I guess the way to go is to observe this, observe the lunatic, and for understanding, to loosen it up a little bit, to be able to relax a little bit, the compulsive elements of it, one will still retain this ability to be maybe detail-oriented, to be precise, to do things well, to complete a project. These are good qualities that one will still maintain, finish what we started, but will be less contracted, less fear, less. There will be some things, there will be understanding that some things they are not all important. It's not everything all important all at once. Maybe we could go to, unless you have something else on lunatic, we can go to the next feature.
Okay.
Yeah, so the last one we are planning to cover today, it's interesting. It's naivete. Naivete, and this is usually associated with what is called the solar body mind type. But at the same time, this solar type, actually this quality of solar, or this quality of naivete, that combines with any type. So any type can have a hue of that. But in a classic description of the naivete is that there is some kind of youthful, young type of psychology where we can't believe that things can go wrong, or we are surprised that people really do that people can be bad, or they are kind of a little idealistic, or too idealistic and gullible, and they have undeveloped somehow they're in order to be discriminant, to be anchored in reality, one needs to sense, to have this intuitive sense when something is off, something is wrong, that it's going to rain very likely tonight. And so the naivete has undeveloped negative sides of the center, so cannot see that bad things may happen to one, or bad things can happen. Very trusting, like a child, like a young child is gullible, easily influenced, manipulated, tricked. And this can play out at all levels of life. Can have like naive attitudes, intellectual attitudes, naive ways of dealing with people, with dangers, with finances, with one's health, with one's approach on how I tackle the day, the clothes I wear, level of preparedness.
Yes, a gullibility, a natural gullibility combined with a sense of innocence.
Hmm.
Because gullibility is innocent in a way, or can be. And particularly when it comes to this feature of naivete. And related to the idea of the lack of sort of belief that things could go wrong. We used to say that people with naivete have undeveloped negative halves of centers, which means they cannot discriminate. This is interesting, this idea of discrimination. We mentioned it in relation to Tramp. We mentioned it in relation to Lunatic, how they're different in this regard. And naivete is another one where there can be a lack of discrimination. But on the other hand, someone with naivete is the one who goes boldly forth and tries to do something because they don't think they can't do it. They don't see that it might not be possible. Whereas another person, another feature would say, there's no way I could ever do that. I couldn't do that. And the person with naivete does, oh, I can do, I'll do. And they do it. And so many times it works. They'll start a business or they'll start an enterprise or
Hmm.
something, but it's done naively in the beginning. But because they were naive, it allowed them to not see the obstacles in their way. And by virtue of that, they overcame the obstacles.
Hmm.
So it can be tricky to discern this in yourself. But you can see it often in, yes, in the way people dress too. You'll see someone dressed and they're almost dressed like a child. You'll see a 80-year-old woman who's dressed like a princess, a little princess out of the Disney movie almost. And she'll be bright-eyed, she'll be almost floating in the air, you know. And that's been her view of life as she passed through life, was this with this naive innocence that has had her seem and appear youthful all her life, because her outlook has been youthful, just like a small innocent child who is naive, hasn't learned to discriminate.
I guess there's this quality of I can't do it, or life is too much. I'm not capable to do life. I'm not capable. It's too much. It's too heavy. I don't belong here. As if life is too complicated and too dark, too heavy. And it's interesting that a lot of people who there needs to be some naivete and some of the solar element in order to be interested in the spiritual path, because now we are dedicating our life to something unseen and mysterious and something of the spirit. Yeah, so there needs to be some of this element, but at the same time I noticed that the path sometimes slaps us not to be naive. We started getting to some tight corners, tight situations. I had to be slapped by life, and I had to, end up in really bad financial situation, end up in really bad legal situation, end up really close to bad situations too. And I was lucky and fortunate, and I was protected. But to realize, whoa, this is really dangerous, man. They was so naive to get involved with those people or with those businesses. So it's good to be open. It's good to have faith in the unseen, but at the same time developing some groundedness, some shrewdness. I think Jesus was alluding to this with disciples, telling them to be gentle as lambs, but shrewd or cunning as serpents or wolves. I forgot which one of them. Don't be gullible, don't be naive. I work with people also. They were coming to my group, and then I don't know, some gypsy lady will come and say, oh, I see something in your eye, and I would like to tell you about it. And then they give them a session where they tell them some really vague generalities, and then they charge them this money, and they have a subscription, and they are telling me, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? and somehow the person just couldn't believe that they couldn't grasp the fact that this person was actively tricking me. So to develop this ability that, hey, there are some people that are bad, meaning whatever their unconscious, their ego in a certain way that are going to target me, take advantage of me. Not everybody's just and sweet and loving.
This happens now on the internet where you get a text message or an email and it's called phishing, or somebody's trying to get you to click on something and they offer you something for free, or they say whatever, your credit card has been used now, please click on this link too. And people are fearful and feel like, oh, this person's going to help me, and so they respond and they get taken advantage of accordingly. And we're all naive too. We all have naivete, it seems to me. And there's a vague sense deep in the well of our psychology. And I think it's why, isn't it true? Remind me if you know, Mihai, the last thing to come out of Pandora's box was hope.
Yeah.
And that there's deep in us, there's this hope. It's a sense of hope. I hope everything will be all right. I kind of hope somebody will come along and bail me out. I hope somebody will take care of me. It's this feeling, and it's in our it's in our body, in our physiology, and it's in our psychology. And actually, hope is imagination. That may sound harsh, but in the end, you see it's imagination. It's not conscious. It's not coming from consciousness. That feeling, like a safety net. This safety net's there, will take care of it. And so we all are subject to this in terms of a deep-rooted naivete. But people with chief feature of naivete kind of operate with that in the foreground of their psychology. And it manifests as a hopeful outlook of life. Oh, they're so nice. Well, they're not so mean. Why did you say that? I love Lucy. She's really sweet, or whatever. They have a different outlook of people. Another way that naivete will manifest in the instinctive center, and this is important, can be important for people who have a chief feature of naivete. It will not eat. It will fail to eat. It will just sit, no, I don't need to eat. And it will not eat regularly, and it will not eat healthy. It will not eat any kind of balanced diet at all. Everybody has, occasions where you have the big ice cream or the sugar or whatever, but naivete will munch on little candies all day and not eat a solid meal. And consequently, their immune system will be affected in the long run. And it's not uncommon with people who have chief feature of naivete to have I hate to throw that out there as a general statement, but it can happen because it's instinctive naivete. And you can see how it's a little bit similar to instinctive tramp. But it's not that they don't care, it's that they're naive. Well, you know what? I need to eat, that matters. No, why? It doesn't even occur to someone with naivete to eat. It doesn't occur to them that there's an obstacle ahead that they need to take seriously and gear themselves up for.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say that it's important to understand that all of these features are in all of us, and we can see them all at different times. It's just that one or two usually is predominant in us.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to touch upon something that you said before. I haven't heard that, and I have seen it in people. And yeah, some shadowy aspect of the naivete feature is that, yeah, waiting for someone to save me. Waiting, somebody to rescue me, to make it better for me somehow, which also it could be from a clinical trauma point of view. Let's say if in our childhood we need that. We need to be rescued. We need to be someone to be there for us to make it better. And so part of a development of the psychic is to have that experience. So someone is there for us. But if someone is never there for us, we are abandoned and we are left young, unsupervised, this or that, it can leave these traces of kind of waiting for something, for the missing experience that you know, someone's going to come, someone's going to make it better. So then one can be kind of almost, yeah, setting oneself up and playing the victim or being a victim, and then waiting, somehow not realizing that what's happening now in my life, the mess in my life, is of my own subconscious creation. I created all of this, you know. I'm not bad for that, but I create the mess, and I need to fix it. Yeah, so with the naivete here and the solar, it's important to ground a little bit. So still remain, from one angle, still remain focused on what is the most important. And from our point of view here, the most important thing is to develop our consciousness, to raise our level of consciousness, to use the time to be more awake and to develop our souls. That's, from one angle, it is a very unmaterialistic pursuit and could be seen as a solar pursuit, but we are going with that. At the same time, to be grounded, to be adaptable, to be aware that they are bad people, and to be planning and to be cautious around money and crooks and governments. And so Gurdjieff was a great example of that, like dedicating his life to love, to God and lofty pursuits, while being extremely shrewd, grounded, and versatile.
Yes, I was just thinking while listening. Naivete is a difficult one. I was thinking, what is a useful, not antidote, but obstacle to put in the way of Tramp, so that you can see it better in yourself and understand the psychology behind it. And in the case of Tramp, trying to
Tramp or naivete?
well, I'm thinking about Tramp right now,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but I was trying to think about all of them. It's easier to think about this relative to Tramp and relative to Lunatic than it is relative to Naivete. If you're naive, if you have naivete as a chief feature, what I was trying to think before we end, what could we offer someone, or in relation to this feature, what's a good way to put something against it to see it? And it's not so easy, because this naivete doesn't recognize that it is naive, which is interesting. None of the features recognize really the real nature of what they are, because of course they are not anything. They're a tendency, and then they become our sense of identity. But when our sense of identity becomes grounded in this naivete, it's not necessarily easy to see. How could I do something?
That there's this essential ingredient that God takes care of us, is suffering. I think that bad situations, ending up in bad situation, although I had good intentions and I didn't think of this, that was very helpful for me. I find that I have a healthy dose of solar, and also conditioned some of this, and so I also, it's important. David Hawkins talks about it. Somebody on a spiritual path, a spiritual aspirant, is a child in some way. So there is some naivete and gullibility connected to that. And David Hawkins dedicated, I don't know, a few chapters of or a whole book on warning the spiritual seeker that, hey, that they are many wolves in sheep clothing out there. There are many teachers that are not integrous. There are many teachers that are there to trick you from the very beginning. There are gurus and various people that kind of are either deluded, or they are half deluded, or they are using spiritual principles for certain. So David Hawkins was giving certain cheat sheet to realize that you are following an integrous path and how to recognize a fallen or a false guru, and there are certain traps. But the idea, yeah, to be very careful when you are choosing a group or a spiritual teacher, to not just be to believe anything that is being said, yeah. So be open-minded, but also discern, feel, find out how they live their life, how is their relationships, how is their yeah. So being, yeah, like just like with salesmen, they're trying to sell you something. So needing to have had enough bad experience, and sometimes there's no substitute for that. Having had bad experience in order to learn from. I learned a lot from being. I was in something that I find it was actually some corrupt teaching, and for a long time, I yeah, I totally sensed in me that something was off, but I didn't listen to myself. So I went against myself, believing, putting someone above me, which from one angle, it's important to find a teacher or a guide and to realize that, hey man, this teacher is more experienced than me at this task. So I'm going to be open and listen. But at the same time, yeah, there's the right measure of trusting one's own inner guidance system, and something is off to feel that. And I guess David Hawkins helped with certain saying certain things that a real teacher, an integrous teacher, would not necessarily do. Yeah, I'm not going to go into it now, but yeah.
Yes, as we could go, we could delve into all three of these that we've talked about at much. There is so much to be seen and to know about these. These are like alleyways and caverns in our psychology. Each of them has their own flavor and distinctions, and they branch out each into their own areas. And there's so much more we could say, but this is all by way of introduction to this general concept, trying to give these some specific examples of how these features manifest in us, how we can recognize them through our behavior, as well as through our thought patterns and our the internal engine of our psychology, how the wheels are turning inside. That determines often how we view the world outside, and then how we behave, both in response to it and taking initiative of our own in relation to people, in relation to the world. These features are there as a almost like an atmosphere, psychological and physical atmosphere in us that we are unwise to and don't see, and then in the end up mistaking it as our identity. In right order, when we see these features, we've said it before, I think, that it will be uncomfortable. I've already talked to some people who watched some of our previous videos, and more than one person has said they couldn't bear to watch the whole thing at first. They had to go back and listen 3 or 4 or 5 times just to a short hour, an hour and a half description of these things, which you could describe them much more in depth, as I said. But so it will be uncomfortable to see it, because we have this imaginary idea of who we are, and when that is challenged or exposed or threatened, we grow very uncomfortable. And it's good to work through that and to keep seeing. And that's why we don't encourage you necessarily trying to change anything, because inevitably what will happen, we were talking about this before we started this video, each feature will try to work on itself. Each feature, the first response to seeing chief feature will come from chief feature. And you need to recognize that also. So there's a lot to be learned simply from observing all this.
All right. Well, I think we covered it enough for today, and we'll continue with another episode. I think we have maybe a couple, 2 or 3 others left. And if you're interested in this, both Mihai, myself, and Peter are dedicating time and creating containers for the study of this work. Peter is doing a half-day immersion or 4-hour immersion, I think on the 3rd of August, and there will be information here on exploring this important area of studying and the transmutation of negative emotion. So this is coming up soon, and I'm doing weekly, regular, 4th way non-duality study groups. So you can reach to any of us or both of us if you're interested to make this practical. All right, Peter, thank you.
Thank you once again, Mihai. Talk to you soon.